Shame on you, Richard! You're going to prison for the rest of your life! Shame on you, Richard Allen!
We're bringing you the latest on the Delphi drama as we break down these new allegations of abuse and retaliation within the prison where Richard Allen is being held. Plus, we have the latest on the civil lawsuit between singer Cassie and Sean Diddy Combs. Our power panel weighs in.
A former police officer charged in the chokehold death of his friend.
His conduct was not only criminally reckless, but showed utter disregard for life.
Mr. Mattioli acted reasonably, and he acted appropriately.
I knew that as soon as he got back up, there was going to be more punches thrown.
You'll see this dramatic trial unfold right here on Court TV.
I know what I did. I know I wasn't choking him.
The deadly cop chokehold trial. Trial coverage today on Court TV.
There are many dates in a lifetime that you're going to remember. The date your children are born, the date you're married, the date you buy a first house, the date Abby and Libby went missing. One of those dates was last Friday, October 28, 2022. At that time, we had gathered evidence, and the judge did find probable cause for an arrest of Richard Allen. This investigation is far from complete.
As Mr. Allen is now without counsel, I've ordered him transported back to the Department of Correction. Obviously, without counsel, Mr. Allen's hearing cannot proceed.
What's your reaction to the fact that his counsel withdrew and he wasn't even in court today?
Very disappointed. It doesn't seem to be much of a surprise.
Violence and corruption. An inmate refusing to testify on behalf of Delphi murder suspect Richard Allen over what he says were his fears of retaliation. He's claiming to have experienced violence and corruption at the hands of guards, saying Richard Allen experienced the same. So here's the story. In July, after turning over his first letter to the court, detailing abuse that he says Richard Allen suffered at the Westville Correctional Facility, inmate Robert Baston wrote a response which was released last week saying why he intends not to testify about this. Now, this is after he was subpoenaed to do so by the court. He wrote in part in his letter, quote, I was housed in a cell A2-206 just above Richard M. Allen's cell at A1-107 due to being a voice on how Richard M. Allen was being mistreated by corrupt sergeants. Goes on to say, quote, security cameras will show Sergeant Brandon Williams slamming me to the floor and violently breaking my foot and ankle and intimidating the nurse not to treat my injuries. Also, he says in the letter, quote, I was placed on strip cell and my personal property was taken. When I eventually received my property back, my legal documents were either destroyed or lost or taken due to incriminating recorded dates and times. Some of those recorded dates and times concern how Richard M. Allen was being abused and mistreated by staff and officers. Continues, quote, again, I have witnessed Richard M. Allen being abused and mistreated. I, Robert Baston, ask this court to report this corruption to the proper authorities to investigate. This is big stuff. It really is. So we're wondering this morning, do these new allegations from this other inmate add any credibility to the claims that Richard Allen had been making about his treatment in the jail? Bad treatment, he says, he received at the hands of Odinist jail guards. Let's bring in our power panel to talk about it. I have with me former criminal defense attorney Kirk Nurmi, who famously represented Jodi Arias, jury consultant and human behavior expert Susan Constantine, and family law attorney Lexi Rigdon. Good morning to you all. Wonderful to see you all on this Monday. Kirk Nurmi, would you start things off for us, please? What are you thinking after hearing these claims from this prisoner?
Look, I think this certainly brings credibility to the idea that there is possible abuse in the prison. I don't think it ties it to Odinist or any other group. It could be just endemic in the treatment of inmates in this particular facility. So I think, yes, there's credence to it. I think that makes the court want to investigate. Maybe other agencies are going to get involved to see if there's any real validity to these claims. But I don't think they help Mr. Allen's case or any of his positions in court or his defense, quite frankly.
I hear what you're saying. Susan Constantine, let me go to you next, please. In terms of analyzing the behavior, you're a human behavior expert, and here we have this guy who was under subpoena and essentially explaining to the court, look, Judge, judge, this is why I didn't come to court. I wanted to come to court, but I am afraid for my life, essentially. What do these behaviors say to you about the truthfulness or lack of truthfulness about this guy's claims?
Well, I think that there is truth to it. You know, as Kurt actually stated, I agree with him. And also, let's look at the statements in himself. So what I did yesterday when I got the thread and looked through those letters, there was nothing in those letters and his requests that were deceptive. Everything that I found that he stated were true, and I believe he actually felt that. So why doesn't he want to testify? I think it's obvious, because he could probably be the next victim. So I wouldn't want to. He's in the most dangerous place of the worst of the worst. And so all he's doing is pleading for help to do something.
All right, Susan. Lexi, let me go to you on the point. If we kind of take the odinous claims out of it, we know that's the defense legal theory. We may see it presented, depending on who represents Richard Allen. That's still a question up in the air, really. But if we just take the claims that Richard Allen made about being abused by guards. He first said he was mistreated. This guy is saying that he was an eyewitness. Tell me what you're thinking in terms of that. Does that enhance the credibility of the claims that Richard Allen made of the mistreatment?
Absolutely. The fact that he has an eyewitness to be able to testify to it, and it's not just Richard Allen, because obviously an inmate saying that they're being mistreated without any other evidence is going to be looked at skeptically, especially because he's been trying to be relocated. So that definitely does add credibility. And to piggyback on what Kirk said, I totally agree. I don't think that this has anything to do with Odinism. I think that this is just, assuming any of it is true, then they don't want this guy testifying as to what he saw and how they treated Richard Allen. And it's well known that in prisons, people are not necessarily kind to people accused of child abuse or child murder. So assuming that these guards are actually doing anything like that, it could be nothing more complicated than trying to exact revenge over something that they thought was wrong. Hopefully that's not taking place, because even the worst of the worst do not deserve to be mistreated by the government.
Right, exactly, Lexi. If they did mistreat either one of those guys, they need to be held accountable. They need to be prosecuted too. We'll put a pin in that for now, because there's another big issue on the table with this one. This complicated case involves the judge, Judge Fran Gall, who is under fire for that closed-door meeting she had with Allen's former defense team.
Baldwin, can you provide any comment?
Journalism. It's time for you guys to start being journalists.
Okay, that was attorney Andrew Baldwin talking to the media after he and attorney Brad Rosie claimed that they were essentially forced to resign from the case. Now, the state Supreme Court in Indiana is ordering the transcript to be produced by Judge Gall. She is saying you have to, or excuse me, the court is saying to her that you have to produce that transcript. She had initially refused to turn it over when there was that brief, that friend of the court brief filed, which we told you about on this show. So we know that these attorneys were removed from the case, however that went, whether it was forcible, willing, who knows? It's all up for discussion. But there's a deadline imposed by the Indiana Supreme Court now, November 27th. But on Thursday, the judge, Judge Gall, asked the High Court to keep hundreds of case documents confidential. So the judge does not want this to happen. Respondents' response brief and any supplemental records must be filed directly with the clerk of the Supreme Court on or before Monday, November 27th. No further requests for extension will be granted. Okay, so court's saying no. She's saying, please give me more time. Are we going to ever see this? That's what we want to know. Are we ever going to see the transcripts of what happened in that meeting in the judge's chambers? Let me bring back in my guest, Kirk Nurmi. Your thoughts on this, please?
Well, probably we will, but you know, it really depends on the context of what's in there, right? Because this judge, things are kind of starting to smell bad when it relates to this conference, right? But the caution here is, especially in a high-profile case, there are a lot of things that can happen behind the scenes, sealed court records, what have you, that would affect the client's right to a fair trial, the defendant's right to a fair trial, if these things were released in advance of trial. So depending on what's in there really depends on the timing of release. It'd be something that would be released after trial for appellate purposes if there's a conviction in the case. But right now, maybe maybe it doesn't serve the defendant's Sixth Amendment rights to have those things released, and that's probably potentially giving the judge the benefit of the doubt. That would be a valid concern for her to have.
Oh, that's interesting. Kirk, I love the point you just made. You're the first person I've heard make that point. So maybe it isn't best for Richard Allen. You know, I think there's this insatiable appetite the public has with this case because we know these two beautiful, innocent girls murdered, no answers. The case went cold. It got the true crime community buzzing for years. There are the beautiful victims of this case. Of course, nobody is forgetting what this case is truly about, and that's justice for Abby and Libby. And Susan Constantine, you were someone who's been in the true crime community for a long, long time. You certainly have your finger on the pulse of this case and the thirst for knowledge about it that I think many true crime followers and people who just want to see justice have. Tell me what you think about that. Do you think that this is going to be a bit of a struggle for the high court, perhaps, because of the interests of the public and also, as Kirk said, the interests of the defendant?
And I agree with Kurt. Again, he's hitting on all the right cylinders for me today.
He does that. He does that. We love him on this show.
Yeah, it was wonderful, both of you. But anyway, my personal opinion is that we don't know what we don't know. Myself as a neutral and as a trial consultant, we don't really come to any conclusion until we have enough evidence or proof to thereof, right? So we've got he said, we've got she said, we've got all the stuff that's behind closed doors. The fact that it's hidden and concealed is a form of deceptive behavior. So anytime something is ever concealed, there's something in there we don't want to see. Secrets are what? Held in secret, right? It's because we don't want to hear them, or we don't want, someone doesn't want us to hear them. So there is something that's going on. We don't know what it is, but to Kurt's point, maybe it's in the best for the trial and for the defendant also. So we don't really know what we don't know.
Right. But I like what you said about things that are secret. There could be deception there. This is helpful to think about it. And who knows? Maybe so, maybe not. None of us have seen them, but we are curious. Last but certainly not least, Lexi Rigdon, take us home here. Final thoughts on this, whether we'll see the transcripts and what you think may be best in these circumstances. Oh, and I think we have a frozen video problem with Lexi. We'll see if we can get the video unfrozen. The tech gremlins got us. Kirk Nurmi, let me go back to you on this one, please. With these other criminal defense attorneys who've been court appointed now, I would think that they would have a bit of a concern going on here because what happened in Chambers doesn't involve them, but it does affect their client. To your point just a moment ago, protecting Richard Allen's rights is what they've got to do. Your thoughts on them, please, Kirk?
Well, listen, they're in a difficult position, right? They've got these other attorneys have put these things out there. They put these defenses out there, these claims of odinism, what have you. We don't know how the new attorneys feel about that. We don't know how the new attorneys feel about anything that's going on. And let's face it, they're not really going to have a good relationship with Mr. Allen until all this is sorted out. They're going to be in the back seat. Mr. Allen's going to be thinking that he's going to get his original attorneys back. And in fact, I believe the new attorneys have advocated for that to be the case. So right now, this case is, legally speaking, messed up. And it's really going to take some time to sort out for Mr. Allen to get a fair trial, one that's going to sustain any possible death verdict that could come from this case.
Well said. We'll leave it there for now, but of course, any new developments, we're checking that docket all throughout the day. You'll see the developments here on Court TV. Kirk Nurmi, Susan Constantine, and Lexi Rigdon, thank you all so much for everything this morning. When we come back, our power panel weighs in on the disturbing allegations that were levied against Sean Diddy Combs. Is he really in the clear now that there's been a settlement? Plus, Mario Fernandez Saldana hurling new claims about the prosecutor's office in the case of Microsoft executive Jared Bridegan. We'll hear why Saldana says those prosecutors should get the boot.
A former police officer charged in the chokehold death of his friend.
His conduct was not only criminally reckless, but showed utter disregard for life.
Mr. Mattioli acted reasonably, and he acted appropriately.
I knew that as soon as he got back up, there was going to be more punches thrown.
You'll see this dramatic trial unfold right here on Court TV.
I know what I did. I know I wasn't choking him.
The deadly cop chokehold trial. Trial coverage today on Court TV.